Hi, everyone. It's 6 p.m., so we're going to go ahead and get started.
Sorry. There you go.
Take it away, Patty, since you're here this
Take it away,
time.
Patty. Yes, everybody knows that I love reading that mission statement at the beginning. So we need to have everybody together. And I'm going to read our mission statement. The Frederick County CCAP works in collaboration with students, families, FCPS staff, and the community to advise the Office of Special Education and the Board of Education. The committee will focus on open and honest communication, improving effectiveness and accountability, advocating for the appropriate resources, and identifying individual issues that may often be systemic. The committee will work together to put children first.
Like that long one.
Yeah, yes, I do.
You
Yeah.
just need to.
So, since we did our welcome, now one public comment. And we don't have anyone here who wants to do public comment. So, our next thing will be the approval of the notes from our September 19th meeting. Is everybody, hopefully everybody's had a chance to read the notes. Does anybody have any comments, any corrections? Those are our notes. Yeah, they are. That's COE style.
Yeah, that's the way they get translated into board docs.
Okay.
So make a motion to approve.
Very good.
I move to approve the minutes from October meeting.
You.
Just, you guys are, the recording's on, so speak up a little
Oh,
bit.
yeah.
Otherwise it'll be completely out.
Process improvement this time.
But it's still.
It's a 360 camera.
What?
Does it sound sensitive? Is it like a Zoom?
It will be, when it's over, it'll be populated as a video through Google Meet. And then Public Affairs will truncate it and make it audio only to present. But as you speak, if you speak loud enough, that Coolco speaker will turn to the speaker's voice and hear it better than last time, which we didn't have it. And we had a lot of garbled information.
I need to amend my move because I said October. I meant September.
So I was gonna,
September 19th, 2022.
all right, so we have a motion to approve and we have a second. Second. So all in favor? Okay. It's majority. Majority, yes. Next thing we're going to do is our subcommittee updates.
I can take membership if you'd like.
Yes.
I think probably.
Yeah.
Well, thank you to Dawn for all your work, because I had no idea how to access those files.
Yes, you, trust me, you'll get access and then you'll wish that it had never happened. So
Yeah,
do you want me to?
I'm sure we'll say the same thing.
Okay, go ahead.
I can say over the last few days, we had 2 resignations from the committee, so we have 2 additions. Our new parent member is Rocky Cole, who could not be here today, and then our new community member is Rosa, who is joining us for the first time. Meeting you all.
Are you Rocky or?
I am Rosa.
Sorry. Okay.
We'll get your.
Got it. So we need you. So I make a motion to affirm our 2 new members. All in favor? And now you can start voting. You're affirmed. For yourself, and then you will.
But welcome, we're glad you're here.
Are you all members? You're part of the group.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
They're in our chat.
Oh.
Okay, so
Have your names tags?
John.
John, Claudia, and. She did.
I'll get it.
Sure. So Shauna resigned on Friday, from her position, and Michelle, the week before submitted her resignation. So Rocky is replacing,
For all of CCAC?
yes,
They both resigned.
yes.
So we need a new budget.
We need a new treasurer.
Treasurer, not a new budget. We do need a new budget.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
budget or we budget.
We do need. So well, I'll just say this part, for our bylaws, those that are taking the positions to fill in they take over the term. So that, our parent member is Rocky. Her term will actually end on, this year. She's filling Michelle's spot, which would end this year. And Shauna's term does not expire until next June. So Rosa, you would be termed until then. Of course, both of you are welcome and encouraged to reapply at the end of your term. There's no term limits. Sorry, I'm writing something.
Yeah, I was trying to write something for you.
We're tag teaming
We're
notes so
tag
that we
teaming
can be more
notes.
timely in getting these out next time. So she's helping me out. So with that, Marlena, thank you for kind of jumping right in as co-chair and taking over. But we do also, Rocky's not going to be able to attend this week, or this month. She'll be here next month. But we do need to also fill our treasurer position because Michelle was our treasurer. And the treasurer also is the chair of our budget committee. So we will fill whoever that is in. But do we have any volunteers to join the executive board and the treasurer? Or do we need to nominate? It's not an overly complicated role. It's just keeping up with everyone else and getting the documents in on time for mainly to work with the, can't think of my words.
Welcome to my world.
Sorry. The grant. It's really important to make sure we manage our grant in a timely manner to make sure that we get everything in with the state, that we do our amendments, that we, spend the money that we do have. It's $2,500. But the biggest lift is really getting the grant together and making sure we've all spent what we want to spend.
Well, when we get down to the budget report, just people who are on the budget committee, just think about it. You want to help us out. Okay, next is the communication committee.
We had our first meeting and it went really well. I'm very excited for this year. We went over some of our goals for the year, which are to get the website that we now finally have up and running. We are going to continue working on our social media accounts and hopefully be making them even more accessible, not just with adaptive text on images, but also hopefully getting them up in Spanish for our Spanish speaking families. We also discussed getting into the school's newsletters, and we're hoping to really get the ball rolling with that. That was something we wanted to happen last year, and it just didn't get followed up with, but we have more members who seem to really want to attack everything. Let's see what else. We did submit our plan of work. So we have our proposed plan and timeline, which again include having the website up and running, get our meetings and events into newsletters, hopefully also into PTA announcements as well, creating social media posts year round, but also for our resource fair and our membership in the spring. And what else? We had also discussed in Find Out First, when you first sign up, you get to kind of opt in, which school, which grade, and there's one for special education. And we were saying it'd be nice if there was one specifically for CCAC information, because there's not currently one. So we want to look into doing that. And then the idea of having a subscriber list that we could email out information about CCAC. So we will be digging more into that idea as we go through the year. I think that's everything.
Any questions from anybody? Any comments?
If any of the members think it's something I missed, please speak up, because we went over a lot in our meeting.
Next we have resource fair.
I did not have a meeting. I do have everything drafted to go out to our chairs and our chairs to the committee. I will share what we did last year, but it did not happen this month. I apologize, but I'll hit send right after this. All of my co-committee members look for my email, and I've offered like 2 or 3 a daytime and a nighttime option for us to get together so that I will attend both, but if you guys are not available, we'll block off sometime so we can all get together and knock this out. And we'll send the plan to the entire group as soon as we have it, so you have it. But in general, I did think that we already had chosen a date. Did we do that with the overall, not necessarily for the committee, but for the resource fair, it's usually around St. Patrick's Day, and I believe we put that on the original note, but we'll need to get that out to see if we can still have it. Is that what you're going to say?
I was gonna ask a question. I think you have a date and a snow date.
Yes.
For some reason,
I think
sometimes there's blizzards in March. However, the Routson family reached out, and I wanted to make sure I shared with everybody that they have significant interest to pair a 5K at the resource fair in honor of Friends Network. And they really want a run walk or to partner up. So I wanted to share that with you.
Okay.
And I'll connect you with them so that you guys can discuss that at your committee meeting, how you would stand that up in concert with the resource fair. I think that's kind of cool.
Okay.
We can get the run sign me up put together. We can make sure they'll do everything, but then there'll be like a early morning kind of meet while there's a setup.
Really cool.
Yeah.
Should bring a good group of people to the fair as well, which will be fantastic.
And creates donation opportunities for the Friends Network and CCAC if we partner
Yeah.
with
Who
them.
is that again?
The
Evan,
Routons.
The Routons, Katie and Evan Routons. He's the vice president of the Friends Network.
And in addition to that too, I did speak with Dee Buchanan, who we partnered with last year to do a co-sponsor with, they call it Everybody's Nutcracker. So she has not chosen a date or shared that with me, but I'll share it with the committee and the rest of them. It's a special performance, would be at Middletown High School for families with students with disabilities. So they could come and do that. John and I were there last year. Patty
I was
attended.
there.
Yeah. So it was really cool to watch. So we're excited to do it again. And then we'll be looking for more ideas. I think a few emails have come in with that, but we'll share that as soon as possible.
One thing I want to add to the resource fair is that Michelle Clooney dropped off 2 big boxes. One that has CCAC pens in it, and the other one is has fidgets that she had ordered before she was on. So I have them. Okay, now we're back to budget.
So we did have some updates from Michelle, right?
Sorry, I was trying to type in.
You're doing great.
Where I am. Sorry, I have so many different emails up.
Yes, okay. So Michelle had sent the information for how the remainder of the money that had to be spent by September 30th of this year was spent. And so there is a breakdown, but the gentleman that was at the resource fair last year, he was paid. And then there was the printing of the pens, the fidgets, tablecloths, display boards to be used at the resource fair. there was $450 allotted for that, which included things like stress balls, 300 pens, 150 star-shaped stress balls. And then there was the paper breakdown for the different colors of sheets of paper that she used. Those were all in here too. Do you need me to read?
No, we'll just copy.
And then the printing of the FCPS condensed resource of the parental rights, the safeguards brochure. Those were printed out, so 100 color copy and 100 cardstock two-sided. So those were purchased as well.
And they're at my house also.
Okay.
Yes.
And then there was money that was slotted for Tuscarora High School's Best Buddy program. Linda, do you know if that went through, or Troy?
Who would our grant
Yes.
contact be? Can you remind us?
$350 was supposed to go to Tuscarora High School's Best Buddies. Okay, and then for the binders and the dividers and the stamps and envelopes for membership. And so that is the breakdown.
I have them.
Okay, so everything is at your house, basically, Patty, okay. And you will store it until the resource fair.
And my husband divorces me.
Well, and on that note, everything else is stored in the Park Success Office, that if you do need to use that space, I think that.
I need you. Yes. I've got everything from the resource fair.
Which then would take us to, if anyone is interested in volunteering themselves to be the treasurer. And then would be the chair of the budget committee. Don't all volunteer at once.
Who's currently on the budget committee? Let's look.
Well, I'm on it, but I'm not. Well, I don't think I can be.
Dustin, John, and Dawn.
You just have to be more organized than me.
It's not
No,
on my bar.
they're on the budget committee.
No, she said, he thought I was just saying names.
I said I was on it, but no, I mean, I will try to help, but I can't be the treasurer.
All right, I'm gonna-
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is Michelle still a good resource? Reach out to
I
her?
think so, yeah. Yeah, we'll share her email address, I'm sure she would.
Do you have to vote for second nominations with all volunteers?
Good question, because it's
Just ask.
treasurer.
Volunteered, I don't. We didn't do nomination. I'm putting your name in there now, so there's no going back.
Does
Okay,
anyone want to?
For the
contest
record, I know nothing about what I'm supposed to do right now, so.
We'll fill you in.
Okay.
I actually have a very well documented paper from the previous secretary. So I will share that. Yes. I will get that to you and share everything that I shared with Michelle previously too, so we can.
Well, should
I-
we just
I'll make an email.
should we make it
Official.
an official thing? So who would like to, let's see. What am I gonna say? Well,
Motion to accept
motion to
Dustin's
accept
volunteering.
volunteering. Yes. Very good. And we have a second.
Who was it?
I need names.
It was Laura.
Thank you.
And I seconded it.
Thank you.
Me, and I'm typing the name. And also Kathy did too. Not that I.
All in favor of Dustin being our new treasurer?
Yeah.
I know when you're. There we go. Yeah.
Well, also, because he's the treasurer, not just a chair.
Yes.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Double your pay.
Thank you.
a name.
Okay, so that concludes our subcommittee.
Real quick, sorry. If everyone, including myself, could make sure I know where the subcommittee plans of work are, so I can put them all in a folder, that would help me. I can also direct you to that folder. I sent you guys an email with, if you've already done the plan, just ignore what I sent you. We can just tweak it, but just to make sure I had everything covered. But that way we can keep them all in one spot and everyone can see them. Me too is running. Okay.
Okay, so let's move on to old business. First thing is a blue ribbon update.
So this is going to be covered in the director's comments, but it got skipped last time. So I would like to recommend we let him cover that part of it now. No, not your whole thing, but your blue ribbon update. So that we can, I was there too, so I can jump in.
So, we take a look at our director's comments for those that have access to it. We did in September present our recommendations to the board. For those that need a quick overview of the Blue Ribbon Task Force, that was put together by our previous interim superintendent, Dr. Marco. And the purpose was to review recommendations as it relates to behavioral interventions and practices here in Frederick County, as well as special ed programs here. So that team comprised of SCPS employees as well as community members and parents came up with a total of 48 recommendations. And out of those 48 recommendations, 13 rose to the top. And they specifically were broken down into staffing, special education programming, and professional development and resources. Let's see the presentation. Yes. So I'll share with you the main recommendations that we are putting forward to budget now. They're doing some numbers crunching as we move forward with our fiscal year 24 budget enhancements. So under the terms of professional development, they said that they wanted us to create a multidisciplinary team by feeder pattern that oversees our current de-escalation training and PL experiences. And we very much have already begun to execute that. We have moved forward with MANT as our new crisis prevention program. And moving forward, all staff that are trained in MANT, it will be a 2-day training. And they will be trained by a co-teaching peer. One will be a special educator and one will be a student services staff member. The next one is create a required PL to offer basic prevention, de-escalation, and intervention.
Because you use a lot of words we don't understand, or that I don't understand. So MANT, so CPI is the training that, or if they need to do a restraint.
That was our previous.
So that was an actual
management
program. Okay, so that was a program.
Yep, and we have staff trained currently.
Okay.
We've transitioned to a new crisis management program called MANT.
MANDT.
We just in last week were trained as trainers, 20 individuals, special educators and student services staff. We're working on working together to make sure that we have our training calibrated in the beginning of November. And then starting December forward, we'll begin training school-based staff in MANT. Until they're trained, they'll use CPI.
And you said that the training now is being given to.
The trainers were trained by MANT last week.
20
Okay.
trainers.
20 trainers.
And they were a combination of.
Special educators
in the
and
schools
student
already?
services staff. They're central staff.
Oh, okay.
And then they'll be going in and
Okay.
training.
Some are specialized program coordinators in the schools and some are BCBAs in the schools. I apologize. It's a mix of central staff and school-based staff.
Sorry, thank you, sorry.
The next one is create a required professional learning to offer basic prevention, de-escalation, and intervention strategies for all school staff. So with the adoption of MANT, we will be creating new modules based on their content, as well as prior concepts that our staff have learned, like trauma-informed approaches, as well as positive behavior interventions and support. So that will be new modules that will be created.
did a lot of. I'm just curious what the advantages of Revant over CPI.
So they had, in their RFP cell, was reviewed at several levels. They actually have a relational and conceptual component that focuses primarily in on being able to build relationships, be trauma informed, and what practices do we do in the universal tier 1 support to engage, be conscious as staff members about the words we say, the pacing that we do, and how our environment and the staff member may be helping a child to become dysregulated. So their approach with a heavy focus on de-escalation, that's relational and conceptual, and a very small focus in very limited circumstances where we would have to consider restraint practices, was what made MANT rise to the top in the RFP process. And that training will go to all staff in the district in terms of the de-escalation and the thoughtfulness in approaching students at the tier 1 level. The restraint practices will only be trained to a very small number of individuals.
Next one, yes, ma'am.
You'll do the training annually?
Yes, it is
Once they're
required.
certified the first time. or-
Yeah, once they're trained, we don't certify staff, but once they're trained.
Go back one slide. So this one, the second bullet, required professional learning to offer basic prevention, de-escalation and intervention strategies for all school staff. So that's not, is that the piece of MANT?
Yes. There's 8 chapters, and the first 3 chapters are all about the prevention and de-escalation, which we'll be taking and creating our own FCTS models moving forward so that all staff could access that and just have tools on how to work with individuals. Like, how could I de-escalate, not have to eventually get to a crisis situation.
So when you say all staff, all school staff, who is that?
Mostly instruction, people that will be working with students.
Like bus
So-
drivers?
Yes, we could have access to that.
Like they could have access or they will be trained?
We haven't
This is where
required that they're- yeah, we haven't required that they're trained.
But who is required to be trained?
All instructional staff and administration.
So this is going to be added to the professional learning that they're already required to do.
So this year, because we're in a transition, everyone that is some programs will finish out the rest of the year in CPI, and then we'll slowly transition to MANT. Moving forward, everyone, 2024, everyone will use MANT.
How will that be implemented? Will that be part of the beginning of the year videos that we do?
There will also faculty meetings will take place, and then when our central office behavior team is helping support schools, they'll provide them access to some of that training based on the students you might be working with. Yes.
Does instructional staff include the SEIAs?
Absolutely. Good. Certificated administration and support staff.
The next one is begin the implementation of the PL series on best practices in the areas of co-teaching. Create a comprehensive PL of cognitive assessments, educational scores, sensory profiles, speech assessments, as well as outside assessments to support especially design instruction. The next one is explore a neutral third party to evaluate, investigate, and audit all of the specialized programs. We can provide you with an update. For those that did not see the board meeting, the board did move to ensure that we actually do carry out this recommendation. And so the RFP should be opening up pretty soon. And for those that are not familiar with the RFP, that's a request for proposals. And that basically is putting bid information out to the public to say, this is what we're looking for. And so we have put together a package to say that we would like a company to come in and audit all of our special education processes, our programming, our staffing models, our disproportionality, all of that to give us recommendations to move forward with special education enhancements. Yes.
Will that RFP include previous slide about co-teaching and SDI? Or is
It's
that-
going to look at everything in
Everything.
the world of
So
special ed.
One company is going to do all of that.
May take a few months to get done because it's
Oh, I
a
know.
pretty comprehensive process.
I understand.
The next one is examine the locations of current specialized programs and opportunities to expand placement and additional feeder patterns to better serve students closer to home and with peers. The audit will help with that. Create an advocacy center for families that provide support, information, and best practices, which is integrated and accessible in each feeder pattern. The next one is in the special education programming umbrella is explore an evidence-based program for students that are not an appropriate fit for the current specialized program, like compression, experiment, learning to life. Review our IEP processes across the district to help ensure schools have consistency in approach, uniform language, norms, procedures, and time allocations for various IEP meeting purposes. One of the things that we're doing this year is moving forward with reviewing a new IEP program that we will customize with that company. So with that, we'll dovetail also a new IEP compliance manual that would be associated with that new product.
So will that be in conjunction or replace the Maryland
Yes.
OIEP, whatever?
It would replace.
No longer use that at all.
With all the information will flow over from the old one to the new.
So
one.
usually when you do, there's a transition process of how you access old records, and I've done that before.
We
It
have
doesn't
to-
just copy right over. The very first IEP, you usually have to set it up, but we'll work it out with the new company about how we choose forward.
So with that request for proposal as well, when that bid goes out, companies get to bid for it. Then when we land with approval from the board with what company would come into play, it's usually a 1-year process to build and customize all the components of compliance requirements and an easy way for end users, including parents, to receive progress reports and things like that, and for special educators and special ed providers to easily facilitate the work that they have to do, so that it would likely be that it would be released in FY 24-25 or SY.
And is that specific to Frederick County? Does MSTE necessarily care if we use the standard against those three?
No, it's built into COMAR where it'll like reference either Maryland Online IEP or IEP approved digital system. So as long as we meet all the COMAR requirements, we can build our own system, and some counties have chosen that here in Maryland. Yes, sir.
So just to clarify, the system is going to be using new forms for the parents you're suggesting, is that right?
The goal would be that it would be accessible in ways that Maryland Online IEP isn't, and customized for the users in the school, but also for parents to be able to readily receive progress updates and be able to view the progress of their child in the fidelity of the IEP implementation.
Because obviously this is a significant development. Just to clarify, when we look at the word IEP processes, is that inclusive of this vendor, or are there other things that are being reviewed?
Does it include, I didn't hear that question.
I guess it's a review of IEP processes. My question is the selection of the vendor kind of like MANT? Will it be a comprehensive package from a private sector vendor, or are there procedural issues with the IEP that might be reviewed?
So what it would look like, so if one is building the system so that our staff can be able to put all the necessary information in for you as a parent, so then you would even potentially have an option to log in and download the most recent IEP. But then to your point is our processes. So when I've moved to a system before in the past, and one of the things that you have to do is, of course, you have to train your staff on that new system, but that also gives you an opportunity to ensure that you have the IDA federal regulation, you have the state regulation, and then you have the process for the staff. And so it will, then that way we can merge the new program with a brand new training and on processes of how to write a legally defensible IEP here in Frederick County. So it would be reviewing both how do our day-to-day processes go to write an IEP, and then how do you put it in the new system?
And to your point, the RFP to audit all of our systems that he's talking about, That's going to occur between January and March. We'll have some recommendations from them in March, April. We will be putting this RFP out at the same time as we've received the recommendations, so we can be thoughtful about the scope and sequence and what the audit outcomes of recommendations of what we need to include in the RFP for the IEP system. Because they are two separate things. I think I'm hearing you kind of ask about the review versus the RFP.
Well, thank you for clarifying the sequence. Is there consideration for having parent input or this CCAC input? I mean, I can just say as a parent, this is a significant consideration that we're all dealing with, which is and I know the educators and instructors are dealing with the input of the data, but most practically speaking, just as a parent, reviewing the form is pretty difficult, to say the least, just the layout and the design. So it is exciting to consider, digital interfaces or basically ways to manipulate the reporting. So you could say, okay, just show me yes, Y goals, or just show me, just literally the objectives and the goals of the IEP are so cumbersome the way they currently break out across the form. So I'm just wondering if your audit will include a conversation with the end users, as in the parents or special ed case managers.
That's built into the scope of the audit of all the special education services, et cetera. We wrote in, including focus groups and interviews with school staff, CCAC, parent members, students, community members. So yes, that's built into the audit.
And my last question is, at what point could we be given a preview of the potential vendor? Are you at a point where you have a short list of vendors that you're considering for solutions?
For the audit or for the IEP system?
The IEP system, like MANT, do you have some vendors that you're contemplating? I mean, I would like to begin looking at the vendors you're contemplating.
So the RFP there is a very strict process that you have to follow. So for instance, we're not allowed, if we're going to go the RFP route, we're not allowed to reach out to vendors and say, hey, we're going to be putting a bid out there. We have to put the bid out there. We can notify them, but then they have to submit the materials. And then before anything is opened up, you put together a team, in which could include parents, to rate the individual and how well did they put that packet, what they submitted to us. We have to rate that. And so right now we know of companies out there. I've worked with different companies, but we don't know who will, like for instance, just like when we did the RFP for MANT for crisis prevention, we sent it to a lot of companies we're aware of, but only so many submitted bids. So then that's what it comes down to. We don't know who will end up submitting a bid.
Other existing systems are.
Yes.
So
No, there's tons of companies out there that create online IEP systems all the time.
So doing a little bit of research, we could figure out which ones are what greatest.
Yeah, in the state of Maryland, many of the local districts use TIENET, TIENET. That might be one to take a look at. But there's also many other vendors that allow you to fully customize, which is what we're trying to look for. Because when something's already packaged in a certain way, aligned to, let's say, 504 and the Rehabilitation Act of 504, when a company customizes something based on their perception or interpretation of state law and federal law, going back to them and saying, you need to change this part, we want it to look like this, kind of becomes cumbersome, as the Maryland Online IP was already built. But with some companies, they let you build from the ground up and customize. And so that's kind of what we're looking to try to do more than hop onto a system that's already built, like the Maryland Online IP. And to your question also, I think it'd be really valuable that once the RFP is out for bid and approved by the vendors approved, that we include a parent member or a CCAC member or more than one in our work group meetings as we begin to customize.
And what one of the things I propose and suggest is just looking to, especially adjacent and nearby counties, to just benchmark everything, right? There's so much to learn from other counties and how they're implementing their solutions. So my question is, the vendor that you selected to do the audit, I would just put out there that there could be substantial value in having them review the solutions that other counties have picked to basically evaluate, I mean, you can find a short list of very successful programs that are working well with other counties, and we could just jump to a short list that, that just is incredibly valuable. Instead of trying to start from the bottom and look at our needs and requirements, we could look at what's working for a lot of the counties. And as an example, I was looking at the Board of Education, the state of Maryland has the legislation from 2019 on the reading legislation, the reading requirement legislation. And they have a list of the counties that are using the screening test for dyslexia and other, we have these benchmarks that the county has sourced, that the state has sourced. And so that's an example where if they're sourcing the screening tests, I imagine they're possibly sourcing the solutions like TINET. Anyway, it's a huge issue, so it's great that you guys are reviewing it.
And we're on the same page. That's something that we built into the RFP as well, is that we don't want them just come and audit and say what they think. They're going to have to back it up by research. What is the current best practices out there?
Okay.
So we have quite a few more recommendations, guys. So that's, you all asked me to go. It's up to you all.
I just think this is a good precursor there for us reviewing the board of ed recommendations and making sure that we included the right things on our either supporting or overlapping, so.
Just real quick.
In addition to training for the teachers, are you thinking about training for families? Whether it's in person or some sort of online?
Definitely, yeah. It would be brand new for all of us. So yeah, if we end up, we would love to have a parent portal. So if that was the case, then that would be something, our Partners for Success person would help out with. Our staff would learn to help parents understand how to access it. And that's even something we'd ask the vendor is like, how do you help parents learn how to use the online version of it? So yes, definitely. Because there's apps out there and everything. So yeah.
I'd like whatever processes to start with student outcomes and student success, because I do think that you said it perfectly when you said, we've got to have the form set up a certain way for compliance, right? And so we know that when it's set up for compliance, it doesn't work for parents to be partners in that process. And then, people in the buildings can't. So I think if we start with understanding what needs to be submitted to the state, but what needs to be on that front and center dashboard for IEP status, because what I'm hearing is that, if educators can put updates directly into the system about progress, and then they would be saved maybe at an IEP meeting, like in the official, but it would be a way to capture some of those things and get announcements out. But then parents would be able to look at it like with the dashboard. I think that would be huge. But I do think it's got to start with student outcomes rather than just something that's easier to use.
I'm just going to bounce back for a quick question. Kyler, when we're talking about you said, is this like the beginning of the year videos trainings?
So SCBS staff, it's like a portal for like TLs at the beginning of the year. All the required stuff.
Yeah, and kind of what I'm curious about is this like the click, click, click? Yes, the seconds went by and it checks off that I watched that section.
Well, no,
because I've been a lot
not anymore. Now they ask questions throughout, so you have to.
Okay, you have to pay attention to answer the question. Okay.
We
because I've been-
caught on to people who weren't.
Who were waiting the
And then
10
we could do
seconds.
I mean, even my engineering certifications, you get away with that. It's like a club. Once you pass your test, they
It's
want
like
you to
every
stay
30
in, so you
seconds,
just
ask
click,
a
click,
question
click.
about what you
And
just
then at the
watched.
end, you have to take a quiz.
Yeah.
That actually got me like 3 times. I didn't
Okay.
watch that video.
Good.
Good to know. Okay.
Yeah.
And I would say in regards to PL, that they need to go back to Peter PL, either it's Google Meet or face to face, because we do watch a live slideshow, and it's always uses references. But we as special educators would like that training to be modeled, not just, use the slide as a reference.
Yes, we've spoken about that. So this whole idea of providing the information and then having follow-up with fidelity checks, coaching support in the building with the staff doing work.
So a combination of computer-based and
Yeah,
instructional
thank
learning.
God for Greta, with the transition, and I hate that she left. She came to our school and modeled it, so now we understood.
Absolutely.
I'm gonna keep trying to push through. So add a behavior support position at every elementary school and require a behavior specialist as one of the positions in each school. I know that sounds a little bit confusing if you're not FCPS staff, but you can have a behavior support position and it not be a behavior specialist. That could be a counselor. You could have a behavior specialist, of course, and then there's one more. It's not
Behavior support specialist,
counselor.
school counselor.
It all has to do with the letters on the end of their names. And that.
I didn't come up with this recommendation.
Reported.
All right. It's okay.
I
was there.
Come after
I
me
was there.
now.
I don't remember either.
He would be able to speak to that. But basically what they're saying is that we want a behavior specialist at every school for sure, but then also in addition to that, every elementary school would have the option of a behavior support. They also requested from staffing perspective that we reduce our special education workload and increase staff planning time in all specialized programs. It is going to move forward on all the budget this budget enhancement that all of our specialized programs move forward to 11 months.
Including Rock Creek School.
Increase our special education staffing in all schools, teaching staff, and then also increase our number of special ed administrators and coordinators in all schools. The next one is that they wanted us to implement evidence-based co-teaching models for mainstream and specialized programs, which utilize multiple special education providers, assign staff based on individual student needs as determined by the IEP team, such as one-to-ones.
Sorry. From the increase the previous slide of this, just can you clarify how, from a budgetary perspective, how this is being implemented or will be implemented?
So these were recommendations, and so right now we're doing a cost analysis, and so it doesn't mean that all these recommendations will happen this school year. It may have to happen over time, and that was something even the task force was cognizant of. If you take a look at the actual report, something that I teed them up for, and they did a great job, is they actually kind of wrote them in like a SMART type format. They said like by fiscal year, blah, blah, blah. This is just the condensed version of what they wanted, the meat of it. But they realized that with the audit, for instance, that one earlier, that we weren't going to be able to get recommendations from the audit right away. So the same idea is like, they know that in the grand scheme of it, they would like for us to have more staff, but that's not necessarily going to have to happen overnight. So one of the things that Lynn and I are tasked with is looking at our current numbers, looking how we currently staff. One of the things the audit will do is like, maybe we should reconsider how we do staff. There's options of staffing based on service hours versus the number of students in your school. So that's also another determining factor of like, how would you slowly increase that year over year?
So the budget's being chewed on right now by your budget team, right? For these recommendations?
Yes.
Do you have a timeline for that to be finished?
So this will all be in conjunction with the budget primer that our superintendent has to put out. I believe the timeline is in December. So some of this is going to move forward, and when you see the FY24 budget primer, you will see what correlates to the Blue Ribbon Task Force. So some things may make it on this year's budget, some things may be moved to next year's budget, and it did. But for instance, one thing that we're moving forward for sure because our board requested it is the audit.
Is there any opportunity before it's published in December to have from this advisory committee?
So the process of the budget primer has open hearings that everyone's invited to comment on through the timeline, and we can reshare that from our from our website, the timeline about how that goes.
Because the budget has started now, but it's not baked until May, June. So there's tons of time for public comment as well as even CCAC. One of the things you all will be doing as a team is next month presenting your recommendations, which a lot of them have budget implications as well. And so then board members have an opportunity to say, hey, let's look into this. Let's add this to the budget.
So basically, every department in this building and every school in the county submits their budget request to the superintendent. And then she works with the budget team and creates the superintendent's recommended budget. And then that superintendent's recommended budget basically goes out for public comment. And then the board sits and the board can add things to the budget or take things from the budget based on a rough idea of what we think the county and the state is going to allocate. And after that's done, the board then submits its recommended operating budget, capital budget to the county executive. At that point, we find out, like way down the line, how much we're going to get from the county and the state. There might have to be more cutting at that point, but then, there are public hearings. So there's the superintendent takes comment on her budget before it comes to the board, and then the board will have the Board of Education will have multiple times to take comment on its budget. And like Troy said, it's well into springtime when that budget is finalized. But I think I hear you saying you want to have input, you want to have more specific input into the budget that special education submits to the superintendent. Is that?
Yeah, these recommendations.
Yeah.
And there's obviously a conversation to come up with the initial primer, the initial feedback that is solicited for the public. And this is just such a nice focus group to really get high quality focused collaboration on. And I think I heard you say you're going to get priorities. Priorities in absence of budget office's analysis might be untenable. If we come back and say, yeah, special education teachers number one, well, that may not be feasible across the school district. So if there's any capacity to look at your process before you make an initial primer and come back to this group, I'm just putting it out there.
So next month, you guys are going to sit and make your recommendations to the board about, special education priorities for the year. The board is going to listen to those. I will tell you that the superintendent is absolutely committed. I don't think I'm speaking out of turn at all to say that I think she's absolutely committed to making sure that her budget reflects funding as many of the highest priorities as possible, especially for special education. And then using that to provide better services and rebuild trust. So I think I don't speak for her by any stretch of the imagination. That's what I keep hearing as a board member.
And you can note up here, so here is the timeline for the budget. And November 30th, just 2 days after our November CCAC meeting, there's a community budget forum from 6 to 7 in this boardroom. That's a great opportunity to come and provide comment based on recommendations to the budget. And then again, you'll notice that they released the recommended budget on January 9th. They're having a board discussion and a board meeting, another opportunity for public comment or for input. And then they have more budget, they have operating budget hearings, which are a great opportunity in this boardroom on February 1st.
We care about.
Right. Right there. It's fine.
Skip to the important part.
The whole thing. You get to skip the.
I just didn't ask for it. I'm like, what? Our section there? That's what I want to hear. You could even go, I would recommend going back and looking at some of the previous board recommendations and how they're done. I think they're helpful and just useful. Anyway, keep going.
That was everything for me.
You sure? Well, as we go through ours, if you see a spot, because you know those 13 recommendations better than I do, if you see a spot where like, hey, we should reference, this was also on the task force recommendation, so that these two can say that it came from two directions. I think that would be powerful when we do the presentation.
And to your point, so we do have a November 28th meeting. If the executive board wants to report on the difference between, go back to the budget calendar. I'm saying, go up. So if you present on the 9th and then we come back to a meeting on the 28th and you want to discuss, you can certainly put that on your agenda. then you guys would be teed up if you wanted to go to the community budget forum.
And I think too, if the board has questions after the meeting on the 9th, bringing those questions back to discuss on the 28th. And I think that's a great point about having a speaker representing CCAC come to all the public comment and say, look, you know, we want the stuff to stay in the budget. Because that's really what you're advocating for. You're advocating for those priorities to stay in the budget. And, you know, if you don't want to get bogged down in November when you present to the board, if the committee agrees with all the recommendations of the blue ribbon panel, then you would say that, probably say them again, you know, like if that's what the committee believes, that you really want to reaffirm those and then add CCAC's other recommendations. Because I do think you'd be coming from the two directions there, that means too. But you definitely have to remind these board members what those recommendations are over and over.
Two questions. Real quick. Is it November 8th election day? Is that really the same? Don't we have all schools closed? I assume they're still doing that in the boardroom, and that doesn't interfere with that.
It would make sense to be on that day because you could go. Yeah.
Okay.
Central office staff will be going.
Yeah.
To that same point, I wasn't at the community budget forum last year, and I know there's certain meetings that tend to garner a lot of attention. And being that this one will be right after an interesting election for Board of Education, to say the least, should we expect that to be a chaotic forum? And this is somewhat towards you. What are your thoughts? Do you think
Out
it's
of the chaos.
So they will be at, so they
They don't
it's
start
sworn in
till-
December,
Yeah.
but they go to the first board meeting in January. So that January 11th meeting will likely be, am I correct, Liz, the first date of the new board?
Yeah, sometimes.
I was
there's-
thinking more community though, like the election results come in and then we have a meeting and everyone wants to come be loud.
They usually control though the public comment pretty well. I feel like there's a list and you go by the list and if you don't speak at a certain time, you can
Yeah,
speak
the
at the end.
community
and I-
budget forum is the
it's-
one. And that's the one that staff runs.
Okay,
So that's not typically actually,
not bad.
it says it's here, but
Okay.
sometimes it's usually at school or something.
Well, and the other thing that we need to be cognizant of is that this is November through June.
Yeah.
And Liz can talk about this, but for those that have been a part of the district, like we whittle things right down to the last minute also, or even add things to the last minute. So like you can continue to provide public comment all the way up until June. So this is not, you know, just even when the superintendent comes out with her budget primer, that doesn't mean that that will end up becoming the final approved budget. There could be many iterations. We'll have our audit done. For some reason, that could change the trajectory of something that we put forward. So there's many, many ways to make sure that your voice is heard throughout this process.
I'll just say one more thing right now, which is a lot of the recommendations that are in the task force report and that everybody knows are all recommendations, just in general, for special education, is staffing. Now, we know that these guys have been trying to hire staff, right? Part of their report is the openings. And so we could recommend that the superintendent allot $1 zillion for staffing. But if they're not able to hire those folks, you know, that's another story. So, you know, I mean, I think there has to be some flexible approaches to, you know, using that money mid-year, even reallocating to hire people that you can hire to get. But, you know, I mean, these are all your recommendations. I'm just, staffing is definitely an issue. Because once the money's allocated, it kind of just sits there. And then at the end of the year, the board has the salary savings that we kind of balance the budget with. But all that is positions that weren't filled or that went empty. And that's unfortunate.
This is really great discussion. It is 7:03, I think.
Yep.
And we haven't hit new business yet, and this discussion segues into recommendations and commendations that we will be presenting next month. So I motion to move the recommendations up in new business and then do comments from members after that, if we have any, just so that we can get through them.
Did you second that? I seconded that. And so.
I second it and I also have comments.
Again, we're presenting these recommendations next month, so we kind of need to,
Really in 2 weeks.
2 weeks, so we need to tighten them up. Make sure they're what we want.
All in favor of doing that? Really feel fancy in doing that. Covering the, does he get recommendations first? Okay.
Okay, so then if we're moving that forward, then the next thing is the CCAC recommendations.
Thank you.
Okay, so just a little background. There was a Zoom, or it was Google Meet, where everyone was invited to come and to give feedback. If they couldn't make it, you could email input. So for those of you that attended or emailed input, thank you very much for your participation. The step after that was that the executive committee then met over Zoom, and we went through everything that was typed up from all of the notes, and we took that information and we prioritized. And then last week, Patty and I met, and over Google Meet, I think it was that time, and we then went through and tried to fine tune things. Something else to keep in mind, because I asked Linda how much time we would have. We get about 30 minutes to present. That's it. So what we want to ask for the world, we have to prioritize what it is that we are recommending. So having that background information in mind, anything that you want to ask about, if you can hold it to the end so we can go through the slides and jot down little notes, that would be great. And you can also email, but as Kara said, we have a really fast turnaround time. So I'm just going to get right to it. And I do talk really fast and loud, so I'm sure that thing's picking me up, no problem. Okay, teacher voice. So this is the overview of what it is that Patty and I will be presenting. And so who's clicking? Thanks, Troy. So we'll introduce ourselves, say who we are, maybe a little bit about ourselves, and then we'll go into this overview. The first thing we're going to do is an activator. And you say, why? It's a group of adults. Why do they need something like that? Well, it's probably been a long day for everyone at that point. And because if you live or breathe anything regarding special education, you know, we have our own language. And many of our board members do not have that background. So this is kind of a way to bring them into a little bit of what the life is like for a parent or a community member or an educator who this is the language, this is our love language, right? So that's what we're going to do to get them going with our love language.
Are we
And-
playing the game tonight?
No, we are not playing the game tonight because I don't want you
No,
to.
we're not playing the game.
No. That's why it's not linked on the next slide. No.
You get to wait.
No, I know. You want to see if you know, so you can look at
I don't know.
it. Please. You might want to type in a nickname that night, so if you miss something, you'll watch it. Just saying. Okay, so then the next, can we click? Okay, so it will be linked in there and everybody can use their phone to do it, but I gave 10-second time, so this should take us no more than 2 minutes. I've also tried to time this all out. Okay, so then the next piece,
People that need extended time.
then I'm gonna say, see, when we deny this to children, that's what happens. I will use it as an authentic moment, yes.
This is a non-example.
Yes, what not to do. Okay, then, obviously our mission statement, which we know what that is. We said it earlier, Patty said it earlier, so we'll review that. These are the Board of Education aspirational goals. The reason why these are here is not because we're worried anybody forgot them, but because we link our recommendations to these goals. So this way you could also see where that was coming from, on the right side of all of the recommendations where it aligns. Okay, next. This is kind of our calendar of our meetings and what it looks like in the life of the CCAC member in terms of participation. And then next, this is where we talk about why members are members, why they are here. So these are just some quotes. Obviously, many things have been said, but what a community needs to look at is community voice, staff voice, parent voice, and then student voice, which is probably, if you're able to get that, is the most important voice of all. So if you go to the next one, there is going to be an actual letter added here. I knew that if I put it in now, and it's going to be an excerpt because the actual letter is 3 pages long, that then there might be a lot of questions about it. But it hits right on it. You can tell exactly how this student felt about things, how they were made to feel about things. So I think it's really important. Could it ruffle some feathers? Possibly. Okay. Yes, it's very impactful. Sorry, okay, and then Linda's looking at me like, are you going to behave yourself? No guarantees. Okay.
Just giving you my teacher look.
I know. I read it because I give the same look all day long. In my household and at work. So, okay, so this is an update of our membership. And currently, we indicated the vacancy of Partners for Success right there. But because we did have some members resign, but we've been able to identify who can take those positions, who the replacements are, that is where our membership is. And then this is just a blurb on our subcommittees. The one that is pulled out, we don't have one for Best Buddies right now. So that's just a review. This one can be fast. And then this is where we give our commendations, because you always want to start with positives, right? I mean, who wants to read a present level about their child that starts off with something that isn't positive? I like positive. So we're going to go with that. And this is what we came up with through multiple meetings. But if there are any other commendations that you all would like to see there, feel free. You can speak at the end of as I quickly go through all this, or shoot us an email so we can add it in. Just because there's only one blue bullet left doesn't mean that that's all it has to be. There can be more added. That's just, you know.
The last one should be
Yeah.
Okay, thank
There's
you.
still room for us to clean
Yes.
this up. Thank you. I think you all have comment rights to it on the actual deck. So if you want to comment anything that we missed, please, because it's been a mess.
Yes. Yes, it hasn't
Not a
been
mess,
a
it's been
mess.
really
It's
good.
been a work in
It's been a work in
progress.
process.
Okay, and then the
I've
next.
been a mess. Oh, that's what I have to say.
Troy, next one. Okay, recommendations, next one. Okay, so we try to break it down by different categories. I'm not going to read all of these bullets to you. If you haven't had time to look at it, because I know it just went out earlier. Yes.
Just want to make sure that everywhere you reference OG plus, you write it out, that you write
The plus sign.
you write
The word.
Bowman
Mm-hmm.
OG plus PLUS.
Can somebody capture that for me?
Like BOWMAN
And then a plus is in quotation marks.
and written out,
Capitalized or?
capitalized. with quotes.
We had different
For the
feedback
title.
from
We had
one.
different feedbacks on how.
We'll figure it out.
It's okay, it's okay. That's a new development.
Okay, I'm gonna show it to you after this. So think of this as the goal and the objectives. So there's the overarching, and then these are components of what we would like to see in terms of continuum of services. And Liz, when you said ask for everything, we ask for a lot of things. So, so you'll see some of the things are actually like RISE. That has been a recommendation for the last couple of presentations from what I can see and just looking at past ones. But what Patty and I will do, and you've done it before, Patty, so tell me if I'm wrong, but we will extrapolate a bit on each of those bullets to explain the thinking behind that.
Is the RISE referring to the Hillcrest program?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. And then it tells you what it aligns to. Can we go to the next one? Thanks. So here we have one regarding the transition services. And so we try to break that down from between the different school levels and then also for life after school for our students that may need that employment training and how we can carry that over and work with existing agencies in order to create that bridge for students after either they leave us with their diploma or at the age of 21. And then the next section of recommendations is about process improvements. And so some of this, like what you see here about investing in the electronic IEP system, we could say that supports, like we may go back and edit that today supports, because we also know that that's in the director's comments. Okay, and then next. Staffing, so that one is bolded because I think that you just spoke to that that's happening. So we may need to retweak that wording.
Well, so the team leaders, department chairs are 11-month employees, except some elementary, because of low enrollment, are 5 or 9 days instead of 11 months. No one is 12 months.
Okay.
And all special educators, several of them, other than our specialized programs in Rock Creek, we're asking for them all to be 11 months. But special educators in the general program who are not team leads or department chairs are 10 months. And we don't have currently any request in the budget to ask for the 200 and some teachers to raise from 10 to 11 months, nor do we have anything in the current request for department chairs to move from the recent 11-month shift to 12 months.
Something just for you all to be aware is CCAC also is our staff can opt out of that. If they don't want to be, and then we have to find placement, which means likely if we made all special educators, we would lose special education teachers.
To
They would
another
go to
county.
general, yeah, or go to general
Go to
education.
general ed.
Because some of them don't want to do the 11-month 30. Not for sure they want to do the 12.
Got it. Liz, was your implication about staff to suggest that what's the point of asking for more staff if we can't fill them current and to focus elsewhere? Or were you saying think outside the box on how to get the staff?
I think outside the box, because I think just this conversation right now about, 10 to 11, you have got to lay out the priorities to this board in a way that makes it easy for them. And I say that just having lived the life here. So basically, to read between the lines, if CCAC recommends that special ed teachers have the option of being 11-month employees, they could be 10 or 11. Some will want that and some will not. And some are definitely going to want to not do that, but also teach ESY over the summer because the pay in the contract may be more. So there's all of that stuff to consider, right? And so your end goal could be, I love the goal that you guys had about anybody who needs ESY has a qualified person to teach it. So if you give that recommendation rather than getting into the 10 to 11, because the next board is gonna have to get into negotiations about that stuff. And I can tell you that the 10 to 11 month stuff gets bogged down for months because there's a lot of, well, what about me? And what about me? And what about me? And that's all normal in bargaining units. And so then you start looking at position classifications. And we've got a bunch of new job descriptions, the BCBAs and the BCBs and the, WKRZ in Cincinnati. There's a lot of, I know. But there's a lot of different players here. So, you know, I think these are really specific and they're great, but they're also directed at the program. And you want to keep in mind, what does the board need to know? The board needs to know that you need to put money in the budget to make sure that no kid goes unserved during the summer, right? That's a board goal, right? The board absolutely needs to prioritize flexible special education staffing, board goal, right? And then, you know, that's the kind of, and I think you have it all here, but they're really specific. And I would just be a little careful about that because, you know, some of my friends might ask 25 questions by your third bullet, and not that that's ever happened before. We're all just talking amongst ourselves. So,
Can I ask a question about the last bullet? Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize. So going into there, because I know that not for this board, but other boards, when you ask for something, you don't use it. So like master positions in the past, and there's money left at the end of the year. Then when you come back and you ask for something else, then likely what's going to happen is somebody's going to say, well, you didn't use the money previously. Does that come into play? And do we need to provide the hows in addition to the whats? Because like on the staff parts, I know this is something maybe this committee can't change, but just looking at a few of the documents, if it takes 20 business days to create a new position, and then you have to go through all the other stuff that goes along. It could be, 6 to 9 months into the budget year, maybe before you are able to post it. Is there something that we or people need to do prior to that so that the board is not going to, again, rightfully so say, you know, if we've agreed to this previously, but you didn't use it, so now we're not going to do it this year. Yeah.
I'll just say that as a board member, the board is typically not involved in those department level budget conversations. And so, you know, the board doesn't allocate 10 positions to, you know, the board doesn't say we're hiring 10 new X, Y, and Z. You know, we'll have a goal to hire, you know, enough qualified X, Y, and Z to do this, but then operationally the superintendent's responsible for that. So if stuff sits open for a year and it's an absolutely essential position, I think it just rolls over. But then they calculate salary savings based on the money that wasn't spent on that salary for the previous year. But you'll look and you'll see positions that have sat open for multiple years, even like IT positions and HVAC positions, things like that.
So question I would have like on this slide specifically, because everything I've heard in the past is we're putting through the what we want, not the how do we do it, because that's really their job to figure out. Like if the board says, yes, you have this money based on this recommendation, you guys be like, okay, we've been told to do that. Now this is how we figure it out.
They will ask you, yes, they have asked us in the past. So we recommended coaching or something.
Yeah.
Well, how would you expect to do that? So I'm just saying, as leaders, I would expect that there will be questions from the Board of Ed.
And I think training is really, the first
Yeah.
bullet about training is super vague.
Yeah, and the one that talks about pay differential and the one about reclassification, do we think it would be better received if it was more of a recommendation on evaluating the needs of those types of things versus, because I mean, in the Blue Ribbon Task Force, we brought up the pay differentiation, and there was huge uproar mostly from the FCBS staff of like why they didn't think that was a good idea. Just at least the tables I was sitting around, because it's kind of like, well, if I say special education, to get more, is the PE teacher going to be saying that I should get more, I should get more, she should get less? That's a hard part, and that's all like a bargaining agreement type of thing. So I'm not sure if we should really be recommending like specific pay structures. More of we're recommending it being looked at and evaluated in a different way, but I don't know if we really should be recommending an actual recommendation for that.
I mean, the committee
Why
has to
is that
approach it.
something
I would use language like incentivize, you know, take out all the stops to get people hired. I mean, I think the board needs to hear language like that if that is your top priority about staffing. If you're talking about, you know, going back to actual student needs for one-to-one staffing, I don't think board members really know all the decisions that have been made to move SEIA staffing around. And, you know, some students don't have one-to-ones. I don't know that the board understands why co-teaching is so important.
Yeah.
Because,
Could we explain some of
you
that?
know, I would definitely provide some context for that, because I just don't, I think the board's heard that, but I really don't think there's a lot of folks that are super, of this board, that are super knowledgeable about special education. So giving some of the why and the examples, I think will be really useful.
I think it's important as a case manager, how they're gonna keep the staff.
Retention, not just hiring, but retention.
Walking off their jobs. I'm doing this 39 years, I love special ed. But there's young kids coming in and they're overloaded. Their plate is full. And they're defeated. So the board really needs to think, how are we keeping the staff long-term?
I know we're up against time. I just wanted to comment. You highlighted, you know, from the board's, you know, experience and perception of absorbing this and doing their function. It just dawned on me in listening to your comment how, you know, we really are competing against those. This is a unique year. We're competing against the blue ribbon recommendation. You know, from the board's perspective, they're going to have 13 recommendations from the you know, the task force, and then we're putting forth recommendations. So they're going to, you know, we're going to be asking them effectively to try and reconcile those. And guess who's going to win? And we already understand that there's not going to be a budget that's going to allow all the 13 recommendations to get implemented. We understand that realistically. So our recommendations are going to be under incredible pressure this year to compete with the blue ribbon. And so I think to the extent of scrubbing both those lists, what is this, 4 goals, and we have 6 recommendations, 24 recommendations across 4 goals, plus, so 24 plus 13, and we're going to ask the board to kind of weigh those. I think we're going to be not strategic in that approach. I'm just putting out there, it might really be successful to actually scrub the 13 lists, look for the ones that we recommend, and try and merge them into a shorter list. Just not
Many of these coincide with when you look at them side by side.
The one thing that I think that we would just ask about the 11-month thing is that you all clearly define that. Because right now, if you're an 11-month employee here, you work on an additional 126 hours, which potentially could just be spread throughout the 10 months. So for instance, I think Liz brought up a good point. It will not help us out with ESY.
Right.
Now, that's what Linda and I want. We want a true 11-month calendar. We want staff to work 11 months, not 126 hours where they get to choose to utilize that for progress reports, etc. So I think that's something that we would appreciate. Like if that's a recommendation you all want to continue to move forward, is that you provide more specificity what that 11 months looks like, because it's not impacting students.
Well, and to your point, I think there's huge value in using some of Liz's wording and aligning all of these recommendations to the Blue Ribbon Task Force 13 recommendations. I
So
think
possibly
you're
in
right
addition-
spot on.
In addition to maybe the aspirational goals, maybe we add in a specific thing connecting with blue ribbon.
Maybe even put a
Something
blue
like
ribbon
check
check box.
boxes.
It's almost like, it's almost.
That's what I mean, like over here on the
recommendation.
checkbox or something where it aligns with blue ribbon, that's what we might do that.
And then I just had one question. Who is the FCPS Special Education Council?
I think that one was stemmed from the new legal person that was hired or being hired.
Legal.
Yeah,
Okay.
counsel. Sorry.
So maybe you
Legal
say
counsel.
that.
You can say attorney.
Yeah.
What is their official, what is that title?
Special education. Attorney, special education.
Special
It's
education
called
attorney.
staff attorney.
Staff attorney, comma, special education. I was like, wow, there's a council. How did I not know about a
We were not
council?
invited.
This is why it's useful.
Thank you for clarifying. I don't want to beat a dead horse, but the 11 months. You had told me that it's being rolled out. What does it look like with those? Because I was an 11-month for several years, and mine was exactly what you said, 126 extra hours.
So
that-
for our team leads and our department chairs,
Right.
it is that 126 extra hours when they can do team lead department chair work.
Right.
some of which is involved coming to quarterly sessions with central office to understand what updates are. The other 11-month positions, which currently right now are expressions and pyramid across all levels, and TJ High School Learning for Life, that's specific to their roles and responsibilities in the program that allows them opportunity to do paperwork and get their work done, but also team and get professional learning to build their team up to be effective in their program. So that one has a little less autonomy to just do what it is you need to get done for your job, but includes professional learning opportunities, opportunities to meet as a full program team, to talk about student needs and reprogram for students. And it also builds in some extra time for them to do assessing and paperwork and things that they need to do for functional behavioral assessments and development of behavior intervention plans. So those two are,
hours or like days, like a calendar, or is it either?
it's still hours, but they are more prescribed hours specific. And those, that would be the same way when we want to elevate Rock Creek and All Learning for Life to 11 months, that it would be prescribed use of that 126 hours PL, talking about students with the full team, but also some paperwork and finishing the IP process.
Like now, if you're hired as a speech language pathologist here, you only have an 11-month option. We have a few 12-month, like Child Find SLPs, but when you get hired on as an SLP, you don't have a 10-month, 11-month. Well, it's 11 months, 126 hours.
Okay, so they're not working 11 months, they're working that
Yeah,
126
some of them may
hours.
come in a few
in
days
their 10
before the
months.
school calendar starts. Some may spend at the end, but then some may log an hour on the weekend, log a couple of hours after school. Yeah, it's all, you're keeping up with those
What's my
126
aha
hours.
moment of the day? I thought 11 months, got 11 months.
No, I knew it
We
didn't.
would love for it
That's
to
a
be
little-
negotiated as true 11 months, because then we would have the opportunity to have staff regularly who are supporting students during the school year, support them during the extended school year
You
process.
can't even get an IEP
Right.
adjusted during the summer because
Correct.
there's not staff.
Yeah.
And so then you roll into the new school year. I'm firmly wearing my parent hat right now. Like you roll into a new school year with, last minute emergency drill about your kid's IEP.
Are 11-monthers not eligible for ESY teaching?
No, they could actually do it in addition to their
Like
11
that
months,
is- Okay,
I did.
but it's just a lot of staff don't want to.
okay,
Staff are burnt out.
So
right.
back to incentivizing is the key thing here.
And
Some
there was
way.
a struggle last year to get me honors.
I love
Yeah.
these.
I love
Okay.
7:30.
Yeah,
and
we can,
have one
there's
more
one more
slide.
slide. Yeah, let's go to the next one. We can wordsmith some stuff.
So this one is regarding the Partners for Success position, which we know there's been difficulty filling. So I probably don't need to explain the importance of this, but considering making it 2 positions and then providing secretarial support staff, it's so important it gets its own slide. Do we know who is handling the calls or information that a Partners for Success person would be doing? Like, is it into routes
to.
Absolutely. Special education at mcps.org is the email address, and 301-644-5281, our office. It's also listed now on our website, that contact information, and it's coming directly to our office to be routed then to the appropriate individuals for next steps.
So is anyone like logging that information? So like if you get this to the board and say, oh, this partner would have took 200 calls this week, but no one was available to take it.
Absolutely.
So is the exercise to, yeah, to, what, we have these recommendations, are we trying to rank them or just scrub them or just review what you're gonna?
I think, is there anything that you guys are seeing that just doesn't fit and we should take it out? Should be quickly wordsmithed? I mean, some of it we can take back and we heard feedback for them to be able to speak to, but is there anything like overarching that you're seeing just doesn't fit and as a group, we don't think belongs? we thought we captured what everyone was saying, but just in case. Is there anything drastically missing?
Listen, does the revamping of the IEP program funds that it'll take to do that impinge upon money available for staffing? Because as Liz said, as I understood, that she believes staffing should be the top priority. I don't know how bad the IEP is. I'm an outsider. I've never done it. I know some people find it works for some people. How did it come about that they find a need to revamp that program in light of the other
It's
priorities?
incredibly labor intensive. Even, I mean, would say for,
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
it's been over 20 years that we've had different versions.
Yeah.
And thank God for West Father. But I mean, yeah, you have to know it. I mean, I could do it in my sleep because it's 20 years, but for new people, you have to really practice it. My only concern with the new program is surrounding counties use the online. So when they come into Frederick, we get to roll them over. If we don't get to do that, we'll have to type in all that information into a new document, which is also time consuming.
I would put that in the RFP as some sort of requirement for transitioning of documents from out of county. I mean, it's just because some of those companies will offer that kind of service where, whatever we pay them, we're probably gonna pay them a lot. There might be a piece of their support that would say, if we have out of district IEPs, they need to be transferred via whatever system support you guys get. I don't know if I can work with those companies, obviously, specifically, but other types of programs that have implemented have had that sort of support, so it could be a requirement.
There's ways to migrate.
And John, to your point, the timeline of us looking for a new system would be, we have some relief funds still available through the end of the year. So we could perhaps initiate, the question for the board would be for us to continue it year after year and build it into the budget on an ongoing basis. So it would not impact this year, the request for staffing for FY24. Does that make sense?
It's tricky.
It is tricky, it's sneaky, but it works.
Something that I think that, as you all consider, is that yes, the RISE program has been on there for many years, but I think as some of you all are figuring out, we have a lot of competing factors. The Blue Ribbon Task Force did not talk about moving forward with RISE. Just to give you the cost on that, we have 10 seats. It costs us $725,000 to pay Shepherd Pratt to operate those 10 seats.
Wow.
And
How much
so,
would it cost us to send them to Shepherd Pratt though?
well, but if we created our own program like Blue Ribbon Task Force wanted us to do, it would cost a lot less.
And the reimbursement back from that partnership is less than half of that 700,000. So one of the things that we are doing, to Liz's point, to help an understanding is we're asking in the budget request for additional 11-month teachers, additional 10-month teachers, additional IAs that are 11-month grade 8. So additional BCBAs, additional itinerant therapists. So if in fact that they were funded, we could populate a program like RISE with those positions.
And maybe that's what I want to be specific about here. I don't necessarily know if any of us are specifically saying expand the RISE program. We are saying expand the type of program that supports those kids, correct? I mean, I think it should be, I would personally think there should be some sort of transition because I think it's going well. And we want to learn from what they've done well and not just scrabble and move on. I think that in the Blue Ribbon Task Force, there was something specific, basically like a high functioning autism. I know I hate that word, but yeah, a lot of the kids that ended up in the RISE program, it was just called something different in the recommendation in the Blue Ribbon. So it's there, but it doesn't.
Continuum of services.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, it was created in that space.
Right. So when we say expand the RISE program, I don't know if we're saying expand exactly like it is, or is it we just want the types of students that are being cared for in RISE to continue being cared for in a program like that.
So
how do we say that better?
I think
I
that,
say that about the continuum of services for students, various, you know, neurodiversity. I mean, I think that's what you're talking about because the board is gonna,
Zero in on
I
this
mean, I'm
rise.
just saying,
Yeah, okay,
they're
that's what we
gonna,
wanna
they're
know.
gonna get on that whole like, well, because there's been a lot of conversation about expanding rides over the years. And, you know, at this point, you know, if we, because I think there's a lot of conversations about pyramid in some respects having been a catch-all for a lot of different students. And there's a lot of nodding happening, you know, students with, who may have emotional disabilities versus students.
Actually, autism.
Yeah, yeah, so there's all kinds of different, and that's the continuous services piece, right? And you want to have the right program for the right students. And RISE is a good solution for a certain group of elementary students.
I toured Red recently and, you know, back to the outcomes. First of all, it's a temporary placement. It is emphasizing life crisis training for the staff and BCBA trained staff. So to the extent that the Blue Ribbon panel is recommending BCBAs be placed, essentially at $72,000 per student, you can really probably get that price point down if the county builds in the staffing. And, you know, I mean, when you look at the facility at Hillcrest, it's actually pretty modest. They're doing pull-out services temporarily, and then they're, with support, integrating those students as needed back into the classroom. And that's totally feasible if you have space management at the schools, which I know is a constraint, but if you can have some safe spaces and have those BCBAs in the schools, you can definitely get the price point down. And I think, you know, it would be interesting to collect metrics, but there are probably a larger population of students needing the RISE temporarily for interventions versus the pyramid, which may be a smaller population. So I think if you look at the breakout, I don't even know if we have breakouts of numbers of people who have, you know, how many people who have applied or who have asked to apply, who've been rejected because RISE doesn't have space. I mean, that metric alone would be a justification. And I don't even know if we track denials.
We do. So we started a process last year because we weren't at capacity and then we reached capacity. And so we've had to just stop talking about it as a continuum because we know it's not available, but there literally could be 3 or more classes at the elementary level that students that have similar profiles. But the reason why we wanted to this point, why we said, hey, let's open up our own program, which I've operated similar in other districts, is if they need a long-term stay, they could stay longer. If they need a short-term, they can stay short. That you don't have that option when you're choosing a non-public type 2 Shepherd Pratt placement. The idea is that it is a short-term intervention, and if it doesn't work, they're going to be calling an IEP team saying, this is not working, we need to try something else. Whereas they may be responding to those types of intervention, but just need longer time to respond.
You raised a good point, though. You guys aren't using them as a continuum because it's not available, but the
Yeah, it's
parents are
in
still
peak
talking about it.
capacity.
It's still,
Yeah.
they're like, oh, have you heard about this? I mean, that's probably how True found about it. It's coming up still in forums of like, this, like your kid sounds like he'd be really good in RISE. So they bring it up, but they're not available. So, I mean, that's.
It's just frustrating right
Yeah.
now. Trust me.
Okay.
So I have a quick question, because I know we're at 7:41 with the meeting ending at 8. So when you're talking about combining, creating a chart, simplifying the recommendations, et cetera, one of the needs is to have the presentation to be able to be available on board docs. So when is the timeline you see? Likely it's a 2-week before the meeting, which is Wednesday.
We are going to ask for an extension on that.
To
at least maybe the
Monday,
2nd.
October
I was
31st
saying
at the very
Wednesday,
latest.
November 2nd, which would be a week before.
So,
I mean, we could put on there that there will be a presentation, but it won't be available.
So I forwarded the cover sheet, and I did say November 2nd. But there's no wiggle room.
I mean, if we can get earlier, we absolutely will turn it in earlier. But, and I think what we need everyone here to understand is, are you guys okay with these two taking all this feedback, getting, is there anything on there that you like drastically
Can't live
hate or
with.
can't live with, so that they can rearrange it without having to go through this whole thing again? We don't want to do it without your input, but we want to make sure that we can also meet timelines. And again, like this is the first step. We can go back and talk in public comment as much as we want. We don't necessarily have a 30-minute presentation that we get to do, but we can make a decision to go speak in public comment on behalf of CCAC whenever we want to.
Because the executive board listens to what everybody says, and I feel like as the board, you guys will be able to go back and edit it and change it to what you've heard tonight.
Can I add one thing? To just think about is to come in assertive. I mean, if this is a year, good Lord, if this is a year to be like money, and resources, and you have a fully, the community is here, right? This is more people than I've seen at CCAC in ages, right? People are, and the superintendent's behind this, right? And then you're gonna have an election and all kinds of craziness, right? No matter what. So, so having the board vote, like having the board, asking the board how they're gonna, because you'll have everybody say, these sound great, thank you for your service. I mean, I can rehearse it to you. They will. They'll say, you're wonderful, thank you for your time, but you are. And you're sitting here doing this work. Now, how are you gonna hold the board accountable for what they say is great? And I will leave you with that because I think it's a big deal, because every year I've sat up here myself and said, okay, friends, how are we gonna report back to CCAC about what we did to hold up our end of the bargain as board members? And we never do. And it's not because they don't care, it's just because there's something else that, something else that happens. So I think thinking about as a committee, how you guys are gonna, you could build in there, we'll come back in 6 months and you tell us how it's going. Or you could demand very clearly that CCAC be an integral member of the RFP review teams, just like your suggestions as well. I think some of those things where there's really concrete action, because I see ad training and I think, okay, so how are you gonna hold your new board accountable? So, in the budget pieces. So, and it's not, it's not being assertive for the sake of being assertive, it's accountability and giving them something to hold on to.
Well, I will help you guys craft some of that, because I was concerned, a few months ago when I kept hearing, we didn't know anything about that. We didn't know anything about that. And I went back into all of our notes for the past 7 years and looked at some of the documents, watched the videos where we specifically brought things up related to the stuff that happened in DOJ. We may not have used those exact words, but for every one of those board members to say, I've never heard anything about this, the CCAC never brought it up. Well, yeah, we did. But then what did we not do is maybe make it follow up. We weren't as pointed as we could have been. We danced around things a little bit in some cases. So it's good feedback, because I think we have to be really clear.
I just wondered, taking what he said, should we implement a kind of mechanism to do that follow-up? I don't know if it exists, but something more, constant, I don't know.
And specifically because we are gonna have 4 new board members that are not gonna be there for this.
Right.
We should definitely recommend that we need to have follow-up as soon as those 4 board members are in place.
I mean, I appreciate Liz's point. I mean, we either ask them ask the board to delegate somebody who will brief CCAC, or we ask that they insert us in the process so that we can influence the process, or give input. So it's really two sides of the coin here on how we want to do it. Do we want to extend ourselves and request to insert ourselves in the RFPs or some of the recommendations, like, hey, invite a member of RISE to contribute invite a member of CCAT to contribute to the RISE, BCB, whatever the outcome is, whatever the matrix is for a recommendation. We either want to be briefed on it or we want to be inserted into it.
Yeah, I mean, I think having CCAC at the table, I mean, I think this committee, represents all parts of special education. And I think, I think a lot of times it's been more of a reactive, like, oh, we'll let you know how it's going. So that could be a recommendation in itself, which is CCAC is proactively involved, in every. I don't want it to take over. I tend to take over conversations and say things I want to hear. So I just don't want to do that. But I do think being really specific about what you want from the board, because so many of these recommendations are very tactical and operational. And, when the board gets down into that, it doesn't usually go well. So.
And on the flip side, if they involve us, we need to participate. We have historically been great at saying everything we want, but when it's time to volunteer, sometimes we disappear. So I think we need to make sure that we are also being willing to step up and say, if they're going to hold a task force, we should go be part of it. On that note, could you all, as many people as can, show up to this meeting to support these two when they're speaking, so that we're all sitting there together, as many of us that can be there, to make sure that we are representing the groups we're representing.
I motion to extend the meeting by 15 minutes because we still have a lot to go over.
I second that motion.
And Laura?
Sorry, guys.
All in favor? All in favor?
We rarely finish on time, but we're also rarely this productive and don't finish on
Right.
time. So I'm pleased with this part. I'm
All
okay
in
with going
favor of
forward.
extending by 15 minutes? Okay, we've got more than majority to do that.
Because there are a lot of good points being made, but we do have other agenda items to go. So should we all feel.
Well, in the interest of director comments, we just went over the Blue Ribbon Task Force. The last two updates to the board are linked there, and our reporting next month to you is on recommendation number 2 with regard to literacy specialists working with special educators to make sure at the high school level. So we will have reporting. We've just finished director comments. If you're okay with that.
Jumped in line.
Yeah, we went.
Any specific Board of Ed comments separately from what you've already shared with us?
No, you guys have done a great job on these. It's a lot of hard work. But, don't hold back.
Comments here, community comments, and
Yep.
CPS.
Okay, so now we're going back to new business. And any comments from parent members of CCAC? Yes, ma'am.
Yes, I would like to speak to the reclassification process of the community liaison. We all agree that our ultimate goal is to provide supports, resources, and specialized instruction to educate students with disabilities, and that our number one priority is putting the students and their needs first. FCPS uses staffing plans to monitor the assignment of personnel resources. The offices, departments, and special education engage in ongoing monitoring of student data for numbers of identified student services provided, etc. Changes to staffing are determined based on that updated data according to the Special Education Staffing Plan, SFY 22, page 11. That being said, Partners for Success has been vacant for some time, and its most recent hire resigned within weeks of the start of the school year. Analyzing data determines how best to serve the number of students within special education. And again, we can all agree that data gathering is beneficial for staffing and instructional delivery models. As of August 30th, 2021, FCPS supported 4,874 students with disabilities. The count changes daily. An unintentional, unidentified piece in this data gathering is the families of these children. In order for Partners of Success to adequately function as a successful program, it is imperative that FCPS continues to acknowledge that parents of special education children need assistance. Given the recent DOJ report, this program should be a key player for FCPS earning back trust from families with special education students. Therefore, as a parent member, I am respectfully bringing before the directors of the Office of Special Education a draft plan of reclassification, reorganization of Partners for Success. For FCPS to rebuild and maintain high-quality services provided to the students, it first must acknowledge the families of these students. Families need information. Families need support. Families need assistance. Families need answers to their questions. Therefore, as a parent member, I am respectfully proposing an additional position to the already existing Partners of Success position. This action allows each position to concentrate on the special education procedures and processes specifically for elementary and secondary education. Each position would provide opportunities assisting families to answer their questions, identify needs, and appropriate resources specific to each family's students, situations, and education level. Therefore, as a parent member, I am respectfully requesting reclassification of the current position, community liaison, to elementary community coordinator and secondary community coordinator. Both positions also have ongoing and effective collaboration when providing training, workshops, exposure, and network strengthening. I also am requesting $1 zillion from the budget for the reclassification of these positions. I went ahead and got a leg up on the Human Resources Department, and a critical position that matches the community liaison is the outreach coordinator for Butterfly Ridge Elementary School. The support salary is grade S11, $25.94 to $27.52 an hour. And the duties are almost similar, with the exception that the community liaisons are more. Thus, breaking the position into two reasonable divisions. And there's other coordinators out there. I'm not asking for anything special that doesn't already exist with this $1 zillion I need you guys to do for this. There is Community Agency School Services, or CAS. There is a coordinator position there. And Family Community Involvement Coordinator. Looking to the future, and this is like, okay, so I'm dreaming. I'm probably dreaming right now, but humor me here and go with it. I'd like to see maybe all of these offices combined. And again, could be dreaming, but it would make sense to have something that is assisting parents for gen ed and special ed together. Elementary, secondary, you got specialists for both. Furthermore, I wrote the reclassification proposals. I can send them to you electronically, and you can delete them or review them at your leisure. I would appreciate it if you would. Thank you.
Any more comments from parent members? Thank you, Laura.
Thank you, Patty.
Yes, sir.
I just want to observe something related to the IEP process for the Blue Ribbon. The Elevate program during the summer, the literacy tutoring that happened last academic year, and the math program that's happening this year are funded by basically the same grant programs for the after school grant program and then the summer Elevate program. There is no connection to the IEP students to these grant programs. And I was surprised by that. My child was invited to attend it, but then this year I had to ask for consideration. It is a missed opportunity to not holistically look when we're doing that IEP process review, the Blue Ribbon's recommending, to not really consider the complementary opportunity here to help these students formally by adding the Elevate and the after school literacy program. Now they are separately funded, but in talking to the staff at the central office, they said, for example, that the after school tutoring program is receiving multiple federal funds, revenues through that grant, and that there's a long-standing expectation that will continue. Whereas the grant funds for the Elevate summer program are much more in doubt as to whether they'll continue. But I understand generally that these Elevate programs and after school tutoring are countywide. So again, I'm just putting out there for consideration to look at that IEP process review on how these might be evaluated with that audit. Thanks.
Yeah. I just wanted to share that I was asked to join an MSDE focus group looking at the changes for restraint and seclusion. Obviously, Frederick County has already removed seclusion, but the state mandate is that all Maryland schools will remove seclusion, and there's a timeline to do it. And so there's a task force or focus group led by Marcella Frankowski, the head of special education for the state. And it's a cross-functional team. So I'm there representing a parent, Guy, I never remember his last name, Stevens, who advocated for that change in Calvert County. And he came and spoke here last year, is on there. There is a representative from one of the non-public schools that removed seclusion a couple of years ago. So they're having some impact and statements there, as well as multitudes of MSD people that I can't remember who they all were, and a few other directors from other counties, just as like a cross-functional team. It's been very interesting. It's also been interesting coming from like our perspective, where we've already started making some efforts with the help of that team, and we're just looking for recommendations on how they're going to roll it out. So I don't have any necessarily great feedback yet, other than it's been a really good conversation, and that the state is also looking at everything, much of what we've already done, and looking for ways that they can improve upon what we've started. But I will give readouts as I learn more. I think I have one more meeting, and then hopefully it'll actually continue a little bit further. But it's been it's very effective the way it's set up. I mean, I think they've broken us into groups really well. I will say that probably the non-employees are the most vocal. Surprise! I mean, they're sitting there with their bosses, so I get that. It's been very honest, open conversation in those rooms, which I think is really good to hear. And I've also, leading back to what maybe for our team is, I've asked both Guy and one of the non-public representatives if we might have to reach out to them, maybe do kind of a CCAC sponsored event from them to also help explain how not using seclusion and some of these other de-escalation tactics has worked in those scenarios. Because I have heard from teachers in Frederick County now that has been removed. There's a lot of what I would say just kind of like urban legends. Like I've heard from people saying, well, now I can get punched in the face and there's nothing anyone can do. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure that's not what the training says, but I can understand why it might sound like that. And so, evaluating some of the things we're bringing up is making sure we're saying what is not just what is seclusion, but what is seclusion not. and what is exclusion and not, and how do we like differentiate and not just move things from one bucket to another. But I thought it would be helpful to maybe have, Guy and someone else come speak, not just to our parents, but to parents, teachers, to everyone, on what it looks like after it's been implemented for some time, because some of those other schools have been doing it, and it's when using some of these proactive solutions has been effective, but change is scary. And the whole culture change is really scary. So I thought that, if anyone has any feedback on that, they would be willing to maybe speak to us, and we would invite parents, teachers, whoever to join. So okay, that's my piece.
Very good. Thank you. Anybody else from parents? Now let's move on to community. Anyone from community? Yes, ma'am.
The last Board of Ed meeting during the, not a closed session, but during the daytime presentation, Dr. Morocco made a presentation on special education. And one of the slides, it said that they were no longer going to use the discrepancy model for identifying kids with disabilities. I know why we do the strengths and weaknesses, but I don't understand why we would eliminate any way of identifying a child that has needs at all. So there wasn't a whole lot of background on why they eliminated that option.
Can you explain what you mean by discrepancy?
So there's two models too. So Maryland State Board of Education says you can identify a disability either by patterns of strengths and weaknesses, right? Really good in this area, but not so good in this area. What's the and there's also the discrepancy model, as if their IQ is average or above average, but their academic scores don't match that. There's a discrepancy between where they're capable of functioning and where they are functioning. So Maryland has said, yeah, we want to go towards the strengths and weaknesses because it's not the wait to fail model, right? We don't want kids to fail before we go, oh my gosh, this is a huge discrepancy between the two. However, I've sat in meetings where that discrepancy is there. I mean, we can't, it happens, the kids go undiagnosed for long periods of time. And then I've heard, and this is before this presentation was done, well, we don't use that model. So the child wasn't identified. So I don't understand why we eliminate any possible way of identifying a child for a disability. I understand why we prefer to use the strengths and weaknesses. So I don't know if you're ever going to elaborate on that, or.
You want to speak to it? Luke has some great experience supporting the patterns of strengths and weaknesses decision-making, and IDEA and the Office of Special Education Programs in the federal government made recommendations as far back as 2004 about using the patterns of strengths and weaknesses. Luke, can you speak to that?
In my understanding, I don't know if COVID is out of conference. That's why I said that.
Sorry.
Very good. Like some
Sit back.
no, my understanding, the recent change is really aligning with what Comar already said, from my understanding. When we reviewed the regulations for how to define this specifically for a learning disability, the two options that were allowed were like response to intervention and a pattern of strengths and weaknesses. So looking at just like the discrepancy piece was like not a, that wasn't really permitted by Comar anyway.
It's actually in there. It's not recommended in the tab bulletin, I should say, in the 2016 tab bulletin for identifying dyslexia, dysgraphia, and dyscalculia. It says, doesn't mean you can't use this. It's just not the preferred method for use.
And I think we actually had like a training this morning. This is all like rolling out right now, basically. The training I had this morning, you could, I think you could have some of the strength, like in cognitive ability and weakness in like specific academic areas. And I couldn't think of any cases where a kid would not qualify.
I agree.
Right. So yeah, I think there's some.
But that's not always what happens, I guess, is more of it.
Yeah, I think it's a valid concern. Like, are any kids going to get lost in the mix with these changes?
Can I ask a question? How does the DIBELS fold into what you're saying for the dysgraphia and dyslexia?
DIBELS is just a screener.
It's
just a screener.
Yeah, that's just a data marker that obviously, so in the grand scheme of it, it's just not patterns and strengths and weaknesses that we're looking at. It's all the data prior to that leading up to the screening meeting and us taking into consideration. Now we're going to test you. We're going to look at your pattern strengths and weaknesses. but we also have all the prior data of all the interventions you received and if you failed to respond to those interventions. So there actually still would be the RTI model as well. Even if you don't demonstrate a pattern of strengths and weaknesses, if the RTI data is strong enough to show that you have received multiple weeks, multiple years of intervention that's evidence and research based, then we may qualify you as a student with SLD via that model. So there's a potential workaround in the event that the team is looking at it in totality, psychologists sitting at the table, case manager sitting at the table, like, no, there is something going on, look at this data. They can qualify the student to RTI model with SLD.
We're being very strategic and using a coaching model as we train, push into the core teams so that the IEP teams are really thinking strategically, as Luke and Troy just shared. One of the data markers that was very clear for us in this district is using the discrepancy model for decision-making was creating a wait and fail moment for our elementary students, which then was creating this ongoing infinity cycle of our high school students not being able to read. We couldn't ignore that. We just could not ignore that. And so the fact that the patterns of strengths and weaknesses in our RTI model still has us looking at the cognitive profile to show where those large gaps are. The proof in the pudding will be the core team centrally pushing in when that decision making is happening, our school psychologists being really versed well so that they are in fact using both patterns of strengths and weaknesses and the gaps in the RTI with the cognitive profile as a decision making process.
So that was all stuff they're all being trained on now.
And also the new model allows more collaboration with all the service providers. Where prior SLD form was filled out primarily by the case manager. Now all stakeholders fill it out. That's good.
Okay, do we have any other comments? I'm throwing it out to SCPS people. Partners for Success Persons. Gone. So we'll wait for the next one. Anybody have anything else?
Yes. There's. And I would like to make a motion to adjourn the meeting. All in favor?
The next meeting is November 28th, right after the break for Thanksgiving.